The first course we're going to take today is the language awareness part of the TKT course. And why have I decided to start with this? Because this is like the core of the TKT. We also have teaching methodologies in the TKT. We have information about assessments, types of assessments. We also have different information about different types of tests like diagnostic tests and all of that in Module One. We have how children learn a language. We also have introductory activities, that can be put to use in your classroom. But at the core of it is English language teaching, which is relevant not just for English teachers, but also for teachers who teach in early years, primary or junior secondary school. Now, we deliberately do not bother to recommend it for teachers who are in the senior school because by the time a child is in the senior school, the child has had a really good grasp of English language, or that is our assumption. But we understand that teachers from the junior secondary down to the early years need to have some idea about language because the language of instruction in your schools is in English language. And if you have a grasp of how children learn language and what their needs are, you might be able to support them. So, I'm going to start now. What is language awareness? It is the awareness of how English or a language works. Now, from the perspective of Cambridge for the teaching knowledge test, we're given 8 different windows, as it were, through which we can teach English. We can teach English as grammar, we can use the lexical approach, we can try phonology, or we can use functions. We can teach English as reading, listening, writing, or speaking. And as we go along, you will see that there are different possibilities for you as a teacher, and you can teach English from any of these perspectives or approaches. Now, let's look at English language from the point of view of basic skills. We teach listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Okay, we can also focus on skills, which basically is teaching from these 4 perspectives. We can focus on the speaking skill, listening skill, reading or writing skills. We can take a functional approach, which I'm going to introduce you to. We can focus on grammar, but in all of this, we must focus on learner's experience, which is relevant to general teaching and learning. So from TKT, you will find that we can transfer a lot of teaching methodologies or a lot of perspectives about teaching and learning to other aspects of teaching, whether you teach history, mathematics, or science, etc. Now, an overview, we're going to look at the skills, the 4 basic skills. In every language, there are 4 basic skills, which are reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So our focus will be 4 basic skills, and I'm going to talk about them, how you can teach English with that focus. Then the functional approach is using expression to teach English language. So you're increasing the vocabulary and the creativity of the learner, increasing their ability to use English by using a simple functional approach, which is actually my favorite way of teaching English language. Then you can teach English using the grammar approach, which some of you who are English teachers already use. So we're going to learn about all of these approaches and then find out what are the advantages or what are the peculiar things about each approach. And remember that as teachers, you're going to be transferring some of your knowledge from this session into teaching of all the other subjects. Today and tomorrow we'll be focusing on Module 1. So this is my first slide for today. And tomorrow we'll have another session at the same time. Now, with a grammar focus, grammar is basically telling us how language is organized. It speaks about structure. Okay? So in grammar, we have the expression grammatical form. Okay, so for example, to know the form of a word, you might want to um, identify the base word and then see if there's any other thing connected to that word that gives us more information about that word. So, for example, a noun like boy is a base word, but you can add an S to it to make it a plural. So we could say boys is the base word, which is a noun plus an S. Very simple way of analyzing English language. Now, your test or your exam is not going to focus on, oh, break this into bits and all that. No, I'm going to show you examples, but I'm just teaching you, making you aware. I'm not teaching you grammar now. I'm making you aware of how English language is taught. So, in the case of a sentence like she's a girl, using the grammar approach, we could be looking at the parts of speech. We could be looking at the um, the um, the sentence structure. Is it a simple sentence? Is it a complex sentence? We could be looking at different things, and we could break down a simple sentence like that using a structural approach. So she's a girl. We could say it's pronoun plus is, which is a verb, the verb to be, plus a, which is an article and a noun. But don't worry about that. We're only just looking at how teachers teach English language. Okay? In English, there are 9 parts of speech, and some teachers focus a lot on teaching English from the perspective of the 9 parts of speech or through grammatical form, which is basically the sentence structure and what it's made of. Now, let's go on. So, in language awareness, we begin to realize that you could be teaching about nouns or verbs or adjectives, but that's not the only thing that we need to focus on. We should focus on the structure itself because a noun can act as a subject in a sentence, but another part of speech, the adjective, cannot. I'm just creating awareness and I'm going somewhere. So the form of a part of speech varies. The same word could be a noun, it could also be a verb, it could also be an adjective. So, how do we know what part of speech a word is? It could be according to the function, from the function, how that word functions, or some people can look at it in terms of structure. Okay, so I'm going to show you what exactly I mean. So, a noun functions in description as the name of a person, a place, or thing. We can say a verb's function is to state an action, it's a state of being or an experience. We could say an adjective describes one thing or the other. So, those are functions at the very lower levels. But let's go on. So, let's look at this quickly. We have different parts of speech, and I'm going somewhere. We're not teaching you grammar, we're just making you aware so that as you teach in your classrooms, you know how to deal with things like this. So we have a word quickly, quickly. We have another word, the. We have across, he, as, ah. Now, how do we identify their functions? They are best identified within sentences. So when we say quickly, he walked away quickly, then we're able to say, okay, quickly functions like this. Quickly is talking about the manner in which he walked away. So quickly is an adverb because adverbs talk about manner, degree, time, etc. Okay, I'm not going to focus on this, but you have my slides in the video recording and you can go through it. Now, we go a little bit further. In the grammar approach, we can analyze, we can teach by analyzing and saying what is a verb, and choose the verb in the sentence, underline the verb in the sentence, and all of that. We could choose a preposition, and we could say there are some categories of prepositions like place, time, contrast, etc. This is a grammar approach. A lot of teachers love to teach English this way. So now let's look at some examples here. We have the verb jump. I can jump. What is the function? Jump in that sentence is showing an action. And what are the categories of verbs? Some categories that are highlighted here are regular and irregular verbs. So the teacher who loves the grammar approach generally does a lot of grammatical analysis, finding out the position of a word or the function of a word within the sentence. This is an approach to teaching English. Now, fortunately, Cambridge has given a glossary, and in your glossary are all the terms for English language teaching that you need to know. And they're amongst the handouts that I sent to you. So if you're having any misunderstanding or you're not clear about some of these grammatical terms, just open your glossary and check it out using alphabetical order. Remember, if you're going to sit for this exam, you usually need to have like 6 weeks at least before the exam to practice. And we're going to look at a sample exam together, so you'll see that the exams are not so complicated. They're actually simple. There are 80 questions and they're in multiple choice. So this is the grammar approach. Now, another approach that is a little bit within grammar is that a word is the functional approach, but we're looking at it at word level now. A word can function in different ways. So we can say he boxed his ear. He opened a box and he left his suitcase in the box room. What are we learning? Depending on the function, the word changes from one part of speech to the other. So one word, box, can be a verb, it can be a noun, it can be an adjective. Therefore, it simply means that as English language teachers, or when we are teaching using language, we need to be as specific as possible. We're still creating awareness, language awareness. We're trying to tell you that this is what happens in grammar. Words are dynamic, and sentences can be dynamic. And the use of a sentence, of a word in a sentence, the position can tell us a lot about it, and the function can tell us a lot about it. So my advice for all teachers is when teaching grammar using the teaching English using the grammar approach, as much as possible, do some kind of analysis on the side before you come to your class so that you are sure that when you ask a student, name an adjective, and a child says box, you know for sure that the child is right. A lot of teachers might say, no, you're wrong, sit down. Because in their mind, box is maybe a carton. But it's not only a carton, it can be to punch somebody, it could also be an adjective describing the room in a boarding house where we keep our suitcases. So the best English teachers will never define a word in isolation. They will always define it within context. And that's very, very important. So in a spelling bee, for example, we do not say spell cat. We say things like spell cat. The cat meowed. Spell school. I went to school yesterday. School. Spell jump. The boy can jump. Jump. That's what we do. Why? Because we have so many formations in English. We have formations like homophones and homonyms. Two words in English can have exactly the same sound, but have two different meanings and two different spellings. So it is not enough to hear the sound of a word and jump into conclusion that you know what word has been said. So we teach English within our context. We like to teach it within a sentence, using sentence structures, phrases, expressions. And a tip I'm going to give to some of you is that if your students ask you to define a word, what is the meaning of a word? And they give you the word. My advice is ask them, can you give me a sentence in that word? and then the child gives you a sentence, then truly can you correctly define the meaning of the word. Because if I ask you to tell me the meaning of box, some of you might get it wrong. Why? Because box can mean at least 3 different things from my slide. So I'm teaching you, I'm making you aware of English language and how it works. So if we teach English language in expressions and in sentences, it also means that we can teach it using learners' experience. So instead of teaching verbs, you write on the board verbs, and then you just give a list of words. You're not doing the learner any good. Teach the part of speech inside sentences. All right? And not only using sentences, but using experience. For example, yesterday I went to a party. Do you know what I did yesterday? Can you tell me what I did? And all my students begin to answer. Oh, you drank, you took a drink? Okay, took. And then you write it down. Did you dance? Dance. The teacher writes it down. Did you eat something? Eat. And you are eliciting the language from your learners within a context. When you have created this context of how verbs can be used to describe what I did in a party, then students can understand it a lot better. So, what can we take from this into teaching of another subject? Learners' experience is important for making what is abstract to become familiar. I'm still focusing on language awareness, but I want you to know that we can transfer this teaching knowledge test, this knowledge of how to teach English, into teaching other subjects. Language is dynamic, just like learning is dynamic. I'd like for someone to please confirm if you can hear me and if you can see my slides. If anyone can, don't worry if you're having a connection issue because I'm recording the training. All right? Language is dynamic, very important. Now, that is something important for us to know as teachers.